Hi there everyone, this is a lesson, a part 3 of a series of lessons on functions. I've saved the best to last. This is inverse functions, alright. Now an inverse function is exactly that. It's the idea of going backwards, alright, in relation to functions. So if you think about the inverse operation of, for example, plus, then the inverse operation that would be take away. If I said multiply, then the inverse operation would be divide. But of course, with an inverse function, there's a few more things taking place. But essentially, it is that same kind of idea. You need to think about how you go backwards from an original function. All right. So, the best way of looking at it is an inverse function we found by making x the subject, and that's what really you're going to end up doing. All right. So just rearranging an equation. All right. But essentially, I'll talk you through it as we kind of go. Right, it comes with a bunch of notation, and again, this is really what you need to be keeping an eye out for exam and being aware of it. So if you don't know what this notation f of -1 or g of -1 means, then of course you wouldn't have a clue that that is the inverse operation. But now that I'm telling you, f to the -1 is the inverse function of f of x, and the g to the -1 is the inverse function of g of x. Okay, so that's what you need to do. So let's look at an example. So we've got f of x as being 5x plus 3. And I want to find the inverse of that. All right. So in a minute, we're going to rearrange this bit. I'm going to rearrange this 5x plus 3, this equation here, to get the inverse for it. But I just want to explain why before I get there. So what we've got is a function here, and if you imagine I pick a number to put into here, then I'm going to times it by 5 and then add 3. All right. So I'll say that once more. I'm going to times it by 5 and add 3. Now, if I want to work backwards, which is what the inverse does, then I'm going to need to do the opposite of what I've just said. So rather than times by 5, add 3, I'm going to take away 3 and then divide by 5. All right. So take away 3 and divide by 5, and that's what the inverse function is going to end up doing. But the easiest way of doing it, like I said, to get that is just make x the subject. All right. So we're going to take our function there, and we're going to rearrange this so that I'm going to isolate x on its own. Okay. So I want to get rid of this plus 3, so like I said, I need to take it away. So that's going to go your f of x minus 3 equals 5x, so just rearranging that. So I'm treating it like an equation, and then I'm going to divide this lot by the 5, which is going to give me this one. All right, and essentially that is your inverse function, if you think about it. Well, it is, because what I did is I did the opposite of that, take away, and then I did the opposite of that, and then divide by 5, and that's what I've got. All right, so this is your inverse function. What you need to do though at this point is you can't leave it quite like that. I mean, that's the technique to get to it, but you've got to leave it looking like this. All right, so you've got x minus 3. So what you're going to do with this f of x bit, you're going to say, well, the inverse way is I put a number in, i.e. x, minus 3, and then divide by 5. So that is the inverse of that, effectively. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Right, so that's basically it. So you're just going to rearrange it, make it x the subject, and then make sure that you replace what your f of x bit is, whatever that is, doesn't have to be an f, and put an x in its place. All right. Well, let's just look at one more example where it's a little bit more awkward. So I've got x minus 2 divided by 7. All right. Now I could think about that quite clearly. So what I'm going to do is take my x value, take away 2, and then divide by 7. So if we work backwards, I'm going to times it by 7, and then I'm going to add 2. All right, so let's see if that works in the same way. All right, so let's make x the subject. So I've started with this. So the first thing you're going to do is multiply both sides by 7. So 7 kind of comes up, and then it leaves me that one. And then to get rid of this minus 2, then I'm going to add it to the other side, because that's the inverse of it. So I've got 7gx plus 2 equals x. Well, I've made x the subject, and a little bit like the previous one, I cannot leave it with a g of x there, so I'm going to replace that with an x. So my g to the -1, my inverse function of x, is 7x plus 2. All right, 7x plus 2. All right, so that is the inverse operation. All right, so all you are doing for the inverse function, just a kind of summary, is you are rearranging it. You're rearranging it, and then from there, you might get further questions which ask you to put a number in. All right, but then that's something that you did in part 1 of functions. So you might ask me to put a number in it. And in the same way, you might ask to kind of combine inverse functions with other functions, and that would be part 2 that you need to look at, which are composite functions. All right, so there are a variety of different potential things that they could do in assessments to test your understanding of it. But obviously, these 3 parts that I've kind of covered should cover the main aspects of it. All right. Please do go to maths-school.co.uk website. The link is at the bottom. All right, to do some practice on it. But thanks for kind of listening.